Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditam Astuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May our study be fruitful and full of vigor. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this evening, there's a theme there presented. What is Bhakti? And some of this that I'm going to say, I would have repeated over the week. But there is maybe a misunderstanding that in Vedanta, or the practice of even aspects of Advaita, the highest conclusion of the Vedanta, there is no room for dualism and therefore no room for a path of bhakti. But bhakti yoga is seen as a distinct path in at least one of the Upanishads, even two of them, Maitri Upanishad and Svetashvatara Upanishad. The indications are there, and all along in the Upanishads, there is some clue about it. Of course, when we say love of God, we have to be careful about the term God. For this is not a male, nor is it a female. It's not a God as opposed to a goddess, nor is it a neuter. But it is something that is akshara, imperishable, indefinable. And for that reason, some kind of shape has to be given to it in order for us to relate to it as humans. As humans means, in a sense of being embodied. As long as we identify ourselves with a body and a certain inner personality and a way of behaving and a certain history, family history, as long as all of this environment that we call I and me, that we encompass in the word embodied, as long as it is there, we will find it very difficult to relate to any entity that clearly has no form, no characteristics. And yet there are characteristics because that entity manifests itself. And in manifesting itself, it comes to a formless entity that is still worth worshipping because it has clearly some qualities that can be identified and experienced by teachers and saints. In the Upanishads themselves, there's no real word called bhakti. The word bhakti we find in the Bhagavad Gita, we find it in the Bhagavatam, we find it everywhere outside of the Upanishads. But then the Upanishads will have alternate terms for it. So we should not be misled. For example, the Upanishads will have such terms as upasana. It'll have such terms as the inferring meditation, inferring spiritual practice, inferring some kind of relationship which was there. Nididhyasana, manana, and shravana are the means by which we study the scripture. But when we come to the subject of devotion, it's probably wise to take on the point of view of Ramanuja. See, from Ramanuja's point of view, these three methods of studying, that is hearing the scripture or reading the scripture in modern days, reflecting on it and meditating on it, have no meaning unless they're undertaken with great love. And that love of God is what is called bhakti. The term bhakti, of course, means something that is something that is gathered, something that is emotional. It is some term that really means attraction. All along we're told in the Upanishads that we should cease our attraction for the external world. And Bhakti as a system will give us a method whereby, by alternate attraction, our attraction for the world goes away by itself. So by definition, the desire that we have for the world, like a desire that a miser has for his money, or a family man has for his family, or a spouse has for the husband, or parents have for children, or people have for objects. Even, in domestic households, we say that we love our dog or our cat, something like that. Even we love our fish, something like that. Whether that love is returned, we may have a few clues. Certainly a dog loves us. A cat, we're not sure. There's a question mark over it. And we use this term love very loosely. We use it for objects. Oh, I love this food or that food. Some people say, I love chocolate. And so we use this term quite loosely, not exactly knowing what it means, and therefore is worth defining. What are the clues toward this? It's a very interesting analysis that we can do. Firstly, we can get some clues from scripture itself. A body of literature called Narada Bhakti Sutras will tell us, and many, many lectures by Swami Vivekananda compiled in a compounded book called Bhakti Yoga will give us a very comprehensive view of different aspects of this path of bhakti. We have to understand that any system of spiritual practice is equivalent to a tuning operation. We should get rid of any misunderstanding that this term of God is in contrast to anything else. And of course, the Upanishads themselves use the term tat, meaning there's an ultimate truth. And that truth we all seek. And so there are steps and processes toward this, which are similar in all the systems. What we mean by imperishable is very clear. All the things that we love in normal, so-called normal life, all the objects and people, the places, the events, the circumstances, even the physical characteristics we have, or even those domestic animals I mentioned, all of them are perishable. And so whatever path we take, there needs to be a very clear understanding of discernment. There needs to be some proper evaluation. Now, in the case of Bhakti Yoga, it requires less of it. Renunciation is spontaneous and natural. It's akin to human love. If we love somebody, let's say in the youth, in our youthfulness, we fall in love, that's the term. Then we see somebody else who we're attracted to, and we fall in love with that, and the first love falls away. And there are many stories also that illustrate something similar. Supposing we are two people, friends, male friends, and we make friends with a female of the same age, and it becomes a competition. And then all of a sudden I see a mark on the girl's hand, and I remember my parents and others telling me that at a very young age, a sister went astray, was taken by floods. And we don't know what happened, but we did hear she was adopted somewhere. Then I start inquiring, where were you born? Who were your parents? What district did you grow up in? Do you have any memories? And then I discover and get confirmation. That's my sister. The original love for any kind of intimate companionship goes away. And then will I now start competing with the other person? Or will I wish that person goodwill and wish the two every success? Will this terrible, terrible thing of jealousy still be there, or will it go away? Of course it'll go away, because I have now revalued this arrangement. I revalued this relationship. And so Bhakti yoga works in this way. Taking all the energies of feelings and emotions, and we all have them, taking all of that and steering it in a certain direction. One of the evidence for a supreme entity within us that has characteristics of pure consciousness and existence and bliss is the fact that we have blissful emotions within us. We have a sense of humor, we have joy. And the evidence of pure consciousness is the fact that we are thinking beings and we have intelligence. And the fact that we want to survive means that at root, there's something that is existent. We can never think that we are ever dead. We can imagine there's a corpse in front of us, but always there is a witness, there is an onlooker, even of our own corpse in a dream. This is evidence of our perpetual nature. And philosophy tells us of various other states of consciousness by which we can experience and also prove the separation of an onlooker, a witness, witnessing all of these things. So can we not have some understanding that some principle whose august presence makes the sun and moon carry out their function all rhythmically? No galaxy in normal time anyway crashes into another one. Everything carries on completely rhythmically. The NASA has sent a vessel, interesting enough, called Persistence, I think it is, and many, many millions of miles away, it sits on Mars, remotely operated from planet Earth. What a wonderful system that is. What a wonderful feat of technological ingenuity. And yet you see the presence within everything is something like a remote control activity. All these things happen rhythmically, on time, as planned, without our interference, because of that entity's presence. And rivers flow along their courses, they do it properly. And winds go on their course. It is, says the Upanishads, the unseen seer, the unheard hearer, the unthought thinker, the unknown knower. No other seer is there, no other hearer, no other thinker, no other knower than this. It is the absolute. It pervades the unmanifested ether. This we find as a conversation to Gargi in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So even though we cannot directly see this entity or hear or think of it or know it, we don't have to lose hope altogether. Because the very act of seeing, the very act of hearing, the very act of thinking is because of its presence. It's the ever-abiding inner controller. And its glory expresses itself as seeing, as hearing, as thinking, as touch, as taste, as breathing, and also the process of digestion and assimilation in every creature. Just by understanding that food goes in one entrance and gets manufactured into energy on the other side. The very fact that we can take the hands and the tips of the fingers and feel the pulse in many different places on the body. Should we not surely wonder, why is that? How is it? Along with Erwin Schrödinger, who gave a series of lectures, what is life? And it's still the outstanding question. What is life? Now, from a material point of view, we don't know. We can only speculate. We can bring it down to chemical processes. But we have to go a little further, a little deeper. And when we do that, a sense of appreciation comes up that we call devotion or love. What makes God love? And every religion has this concept. There is the greatest commandment in the Jewish Torah, repeated by Jesus. What is the greatest, most principal commandment that we should follow? In other words, what is the discipline or spiritual practice that we should adopt? And it's consistent. You shall love the Lord your God. How? With all your heart, all your mind, all your strength, for every fiber of your being. And so this gets echoed in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. The whole of the 12th chapter of this Gita is dedicated to the subject of devotion. But do we have any real idea of what it is? If we are dealing with such an abstract entity, yet we can catch its presence by feeling, we have to understand that tuning into it, or the process of tuning into it, means that the source of it and the end of it is the same. By tuning in, and if tuning is perfect as we go on through time, what is manifest must be exactly what is being broadcast. And so the feeling initially of loving some entity that is separate to us gets transmuted into the same thing, because broadcast and manifestation, or manifested aspect of broadcast and recipient, the receiving station, it's the same broadcast. It's not a separate broadcast. Whatever radio broadcast there is, or television broadcast to millions and millions of homes, is not delivered separately. What exactly arrives at the receiving station is exactly that at the broadcasting station. And this then means that bhakti culminates ultimately in the very highest conclusion, without any contradiction, of this Advaita, of this non-dualism. And the steps, therefore, regardless of what discipline you use, are broadly the same, with some certain variations. Now, in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which we've covered previously, I just remind you that the question is asked by Arjuna. Having covered both the impersonal, the imperishable, the formless, and also covering that which is formed, which is personal, which is an object of our devotion and love, it seems that there are these two processes, and which one is better is the question. So he says, those devotees who ever steadfast worship you thus, steadfast. You see, devotion is steadfast. Love is steadfast. If love is not steadfast, then it becomes something like a bargaining process. That is human love. I love you if you love me. If you hate me, I hate you. Love is conditional on a reciprocation. Swami Vivekananda, in his lectures defining what is love, makes a kind of triangle. He tells us that love has these three angles. There's no fear in it. There's no rival in it. There's no reward in it. It is purely love for love's sake. That has to be developed. Again, why should we love? We will love spontaneously when we see this flowing aspect. Like being in a river, being submerged in it, detached from it, and yet feeling the flow of it. That kind of thing. So this is a question. Those devotees who ever steadfast worship you in a personal form. Ivam satat yukta ye bhaktas tvam paryupasati yecha pyak aksharam avyaktam tesham ke yogavittamaha. Which of these Those who worship the imperishable, the unmanifest, or the personal, which are better versed in yoga, that means the process, if you believe in a separateness, the process of uniting, or the realization of what is already united. And so the answer comes. It comes very clearly. As usual, Sri Bhagavan Vacha. It says, those who worship me, fixing their minds on me. Fixing means like glue. It never comes off. Ever steadfast, therefore, and endowed with supreme faith. Supreme faith is a key component to the subject of love. There has to be an understanding that sun and moon and the whole environment and the internal environment of breathing, physical environment of breathing and heartbeat, and the psychological processes of thinking, of feeling, of forming what we call the nama part of nama rupa, the external form replicated as a picture internally in the mind. All of these internal processes of deciding, of determining, of planning, of executing, all of these processes are going on. And we have the capacity to steer a flow here or there. But nevertheless, even this capacity comes from a source, one source. The eye of the eye, the ear of the ear, and so on. That one entity standing there. And not the object of our scrutiny. We can't take this God and put him in a test tube and see, are you alkaline or acid? Or see, whether this entity is acid or liquid or solid or gas. Scrutinize this entity in a laboratory and determine what is God. And if we cannot see God externally, we declare this as a non-existent entity, simply subject to a myth somewhere, a primitive myth of an extra cosmic creator somewhere in the sky. This is a current agnostic or atheistic thinking. Please, can you prove that there is a God? Well, you can't prove anything, even in the material sense, because proof is entirely subjective. And if you want objective evidence, there is plenty of it around. Life itself, in answer to the question, what is life? We find the answer. There is that entity. And if religion wishes to call it God, be clear. What do we mean by it? It is that activating, flowing presence which enables everything. It never stops. It continues. And it does it free of charge. Surely we should have a reciprocal love somewhere, a thankfulness somewhere. So the supreme faith that all the so-called obstacles and difficulties in the universe have their corresponding solution provided. That we can confidently take any one of these aspects that we register as negative, and God registers as a wave. We can take it like a telephone call and say, Lord, this is for you. It's yours. It is not me. I'm not doing anything. You're the one who does everything. Then what will I do? The supreme act of love puts me in a servant position. After all the desires that we have puts us in a servant, subordinate position. We are slave to our passions. We are slave to the external world. We are slave to our response. We are slave to our unconscious conditioning. All of this we are slaves to. And the process of Bhakti Yoga is to redirect that slavery. Take all your multiple petty desires and steer them in one solid direction. That is what is called fixing, steadily, and doing it with shraddha, with faith. Faith, utmost unwavering conviction that all things are well and will continue to be well, that everything is in my favor, that God is a good investor in me for a purpose. So these people who have all this, Sri Krishna tells us that these are yuktatma mataha, that these are actually the best of the yogis. But is that the end of the story? No. Yet Vaksharam, but those who worship the Aksharam, the imperishable, the thing that you cannot define, you cannot put into a box, the unmanifest, the personal God is manifested, the omnipresent, present everywhere, the inconceivable, we cannot form a picture of that, unchanging, that is beyond time, immovable, that is no change and no space in it, and eternal, beyond any definition of conditioning. And having subdued all the senses, even minded under all conditions and devoted to the good of all beings, welfare of all beings, truly they also come unto me. And so now we have +1, -1. We have equal measures. The two are balanced on the scale and found to be more or less equal, but not quite. Because he already said that the ones who are fixing their mind on me, he says, and worshiping me steadfastly and with great faith, these I regard as the best. But the others will also come to me. Now there's an interesting thing. What are the conditions for this other route? This mobilization of the emotions is one thing, but it doesn't go away with the other one either. Because the conditions are we have to control the senses. We have to subdue the senses. The senses are intrinsically part of the mind. Another way of saying we have to control the mind, and that creates an even-mindedness where we see in all conditions of praise and blame and plus and minus and hot and cold and pairs of opposites and extremes, under all conditions, even problematic conditions, we are able to be devoted to what? To the welfare of all beings, because we see that there's a flow through every hand, every arm, every leg, every digestive system, even throughout the entire realm of beings, that entity flowing through, that entity by its presence, all the remote control robots are moving, if you want to use the analogy of the NASA spacecraft on Mars. Truly, they also come to me, but what is the problem? Well, their difficulty is much greater because they have to be people of keen intellect. Greater is their difficulty, whose minds are set on the unmanifest. Because we have to conceive of something. For the goal of the unmanifest is very hard for who? For most people. Why? Because of their sense of embodiment. This sense of embodiment is the difficulty. As long as I think I have a body, as long as I acquire agency, as long as I think I'm the one who is moving, that this is my body, and as long as I don't register or re-register it to the divine account, Lord, this is your body, your mind, this is your earth car, and this is your headquarters. This is the place where you sit. This is your wonderful sitting room that I clean through meditation. And this is your body. That is your instrument. See how St. Francis of Assisi, that wonderful prayer, which everybody knows regardless of religion, it says, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. I have a sense of the welfare of all beings. It was very often a criticism. These great people on a spiritual path who want to detach from the whole world, says a Christian missionary, these people have no social conscience. They don't uplift anybody. But it only means that nobody read these passages. These people are there for the welfare of all beings. Swami Vivekananda takes this up seriously. So to them whose minds are thus absorbed in me, I truly soon become the deliverer from the ocean of transmigratory existence beset with death. And those who consecrate all their actions to me regarding me as the supreme goal, and who worship me, meditating on me with single-minded devotion. A wonderful description. We need to go through it carefully. Consecrating all your actions to me. This is really karma yoga with the sweetness of bhakti, the sweetness of love and devotion. And what is the supreme goal of my love? It is that personal entity. And worshipping me, meditating on me with single-minded devotion. Single-minded. That means all our petty desires are gathered together, bundled together, and directed in a very dedicated, concentrated way toward one object of my love, replacing all my little loves with that one central love, in the words of Swami Vivekananda. So what is the method? Well, the method is fix your mind. Take all your attention. This consciousness which is within us gets manifested in various roles, and one of the most significant and easily identified would be the role of attention. Something like a laser beam that has the capacity to scan the field in front of us and give us information. And every organic entity has it. Indeed, every flower has it. Every atom has it. But it's more obvious in organic species. Even a bacteria knows where its environment is. Even a bacteria will have the sense through its membrane to absorb certain required nutrients or certain required chemicals, and filter them and select them through a very, very intricate and complex membrane process that then delivers it ultimately to a recipient that then provides an afferent current both, and a response back through the membrane to the external environment. We can call it digestion and assimilation in a single term. So we have to take this attention and fix it and let our thoughts dwell on that one entity, says Krishna. And hereafter, you will live in me alone. Of this, there's no doubt. Give us an absolute assurance that what I'm saying, there's no doubt about it. And that is where our faith comes. So that is very easy, isn't it not? Is a question I often pose. And there are many examples of it. The most favorite example that Sri Ramakrishna gives and subsequent apostles gave was, if you have a pole and you fix your hand to it and you spin around, children do it until they're dizzy, you don't let go because the centrifugal force will throw you out. And if you have a spinning top, it means that there is a focus on the center of gravity, and you spin it until it slows down and wobbles, and then you try again. There are many examples of how to fix this momentum, because thought is a flowing thing. So fixing your mind on one position, you go around. Like fixing position by the pole star, which is said to be Dhruva. And the most wonderful example of love will be Prahlada's love. In the story of Prahlada, where such fixity of attention and such faith was present that no harm could ever come to this devotee. But you see, the attention wanders and wavers. Our habit isn't necessarily fixed. We have to develop it. And so an alternative is given. What if you cannot fix your mind in this way, in a steady way? Then seek to reach me by constant practice. That is abhyasa yoga, continuously bringing the mind back. We use it when we drive a car. The car wanders off to one way. Automatically, we counter steer it in the other way. Or if we're tuned into a radio broadcast and it goes off the station, we tune the frequency back in. We learn the art of doing that, retuning, because we're suffering from forgetfulness of our own nature and forgetfulness of how that is embodied in a personal way, a way that we love the most. Then retuning it until it becomes automatic, and that means when love increases. We can compare it to new human acquaintances who fall in love. And Gilbert and Sullivan, the great opera authors, developers of the Gilbert and Sullivan operas, they have something like a song, an operatic song, about somebody who fell in love and became mad. He never ate because all his eyesight was in a daze. It seems that he was fixed somewhere in a world of his own. Misery me, lackadaisy thee. He didn't eat anything. He couldn't drink anything. So the song goes. That kind of state. You can see young people today and texting. And when they don't get a reciprocal text, they fret. Oh, 5 minutes passed and no communication. Of course, that all goes away with time, but never mind. Supposing you are able to sustain that kind of energy, the energy that a miser has for his money, that a lover has for the beloved in a human relationship, that a mother has for the children, that a landowner has for property, all of these things. So the condition for this is to take all these gathered desires and seeing that there is a supreme desire or a supreme love somewhere, dedicating all of that there easily and naturally, so that renunciation doesn't have to be an attack on something or giving up something. It doesn't have to be a struggle. It's just the saturation of mind with love displaces everything else. That is the beauty of this method. And so there's an option. But in the human way, the question is asked, if you're incapable of constant practice, bringing the mind constantly back, or repetition, be intent on doing actions for my sake. Even by performing actions, Mudartam api karmani kurvan siddhim avapyasi. Even by performing actions for my sake, even by performing actions, you will attain perfection. You take your normal route of activity, and instead of doing them with a secular mind or an achieving mind orientated toward future success, a result, or with some doubt and insecurity about the past, put the mind in the present moment and understand that all actions are not mine. They are done with borrowed energy. And with that, you give it back to the real owner. So with a mindfulness, you can make every action delightful, a delightful form of worship. But supposing you can't do that, if you're unable to do even this, then taking refuge in me, saying, Lord, I can't do anything, so I'm taking shelter under you. I'm sitting under your cosmic umbrella. You look after everything, but one thing I'll do for you, and that is, I won't claim the fruit or the effects of any of the actions, knowing that not only are you protecting me with your cosmic umbrella, with your shadow, with your love, with your embrace, with your arms, but all things you're doing anyway, and everything is yours. You own the entire cosmos, and therefore I am yours, and all activities belong to you. Now, these processes cater for every single mood and temperament, and we can do it in a reverse way as steps. First step is register everything to God's account, in which case you offer up all the fruits of activities there. Jesus puts it in a vineyard context, the landowner. The landowner is the beloved Lord, the master. And all the fruits of the labors, they go to him. You don't keep anything for yourself. If he wants to dispense something from it, then he'll do it. He'll pay you a kind of reward for it. Then to elevate a different position, and that is to do all activities mindfully, dedicated to the Lord, and then to increase that, and so that you're constantly practicing and doing it in a spontaneous way, so that there's a constant remembrance. Lord, you're here. Lord, you're here. Lord, you're here. Lord, you're constantly with me. And this is called practicing the presence. I often refer to this book, Brother Lawrence, Practicing the Presence of God. That's what it means. Whether I'm cleaning the floor, whether I'm answering the door, whether I'm cooking the food, whether I'm doing computer work, whether I'm doing clerical work, whether I'm in the role of student or mother, whether I'm a householder, or whatever role I'm playing in. Artist, scientist, whatever it is, I'm doing it using divine energy and doing it in the company and presence of the Lord. A delightful companion with me all the way, whatever I'm doing. As I wake up in the morning, Lord, you are there. As I go to bed at night, Lord, you are there. So that the beginning of this constant remembrance becomes a constant presence. And at that point, we will have fixed our minds on the highest, on the Lord. So there's an evolutionary process about this. And this you'll find in the Vedantic text. Bear in mind, we take the Vedantic texts threefold as the Prasthanatraya of the Upanishads, wonderfully assembled in a bouquet, initially abstract and made available only to those Pandits or those Brahmins or the sannyasins, but now available through the Bhagavad Gita for the common person, for everybody to understand in simple language, and coordinating all the disparate elements available in Krishna's time, some 5,000 years ago. All the schools of thought, Sankhya, Yoga, all of these assembled together into one beautiful bouquet of flowers and presented to us and presented for us. All these lofty ideas. Now, of course, they are to be found anyway. I mentioned the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Satanmayo hi amrita isha samstho jnanas sarugo bhuvana syasya gupta. Becoming that, immortal, existing, what? As the Lord. That is, as an entity that is worth offering to and worshipping to. Not the abstract, absolute Brahman now, but a manifest form of it. The knower, the omnipresent, the guardian of this world is he who rules this world forever. For no other cause is found for this ruling. We can consider this whole cosmos as under rule with laws. And we have discovered in physics that there are laws. And these laws seem to be fixed enough. These laws create a balance and a harmony and rhythm to the whole universe. Then there is a lawmaker, surely. You know, in atheistic materialism, often associated with science, it is accepted that the laws of nature are fixed. And it is only that in time gone by, God was seen as a lawmaker, making laws, and the laws were governing the universe. And so they made a military coup against the lawmaker, against the ruler, but incomprehensibly said, the laws of physics and the laws of nature are eternal. They were always there. Now, modern cosmology says that they were all created at a moment in time. That's the current kind of thinking. But even that's incomprehensible. Where did they come from? Were they sitting there in potentia before some eruption occurred? How is it that suddenly the laws occurred? but they are all accepted irrationally to be eternal. Irrationally because there's no reason why they should be there, unless, of course, there is a ruler. And so the Shvetashvatara Upanishad postulates this, not only postulates, but declares it, that there is this ruler, the Lord, and omnipresent, that is present everywhere. That is in every moment in time and in every space. And guards the world is he who rules this world forever. No other cause is found for the ruling. What other cause could there be? And then it goes on. Yo Brahmanam vidhadati purvam, to him who of old creates, the creator itself, Brahma, the cosmic mind itself. Don't forget, this Lord is equivalent to Ishvara. And in the Sankhya system, that is equivalent to Prakriti, nature, nature itself evolving itself from itself. And who truly delivers to him the Vedas, to the truths, the highest truths about the entire universe, to that God who is lighted up by his own intelligence, not any other intelligence. The prayer goes, do I eager for liberation, resort for refuge. See, the language is entirely devotional. And so we find this coming out in the Upanishads themselves, where there is no word for bhakti as such. But bhakti, now we know, attachment. And of course, historically, not just in the Judeo-Christian religion, which emphasizes this aspect of devotion, but we find it increasingly, maybe historically, as a reaction to the Islamic conquests in India. But from the 1st century, we find it developing. We find it in Vaishnavism, we find it in Shaivism, and we find it coming out in the 12th century more and more as a natural development in response to the human need. The human need is that for a form, a tangible aspect. And what it means is the starting point is not the form. The starting point is our attitude, our bhava. We have to decide what is most psychologically suitable for us. Will we put ourselves in the position of a child, or a companion, or a lover, or a partner, or a parent, or have some amorphous understanding of a presence? These are the various bhavas, servant toward a master. Now, that subordinate attitude is a spontaneous movement in much of the bhakti developments, because we are already slaves to our desires. So this ruler, we submit, we subordinate ourselves to it. And when we have this aspect of it, which is simply Lord, with no other particular form or shape, this is the God of the Muslims. This is the Allah, with 99 names that represent different superb qualities, and yet not fully engaging the imagination, not permitted yet. But the human mind requires this form. After all, the whole universe is God's form. Our Vedic philosophy tells us this, that this is a great Purusha, a great person, that what is happening on the microcosm is happening on the macrocosm, that if there is a human entity with a body and a mind and limbs, that the whole universe is this body. There can be no other body. There can be no other cause other than the primary cause. And there can be no secondary result taken from some other immaterial material which doesn't make any sense. Or can a God create something from ex nihilo, from nothing? So that would not be logically possible, nor be very satisfactory. So we are left with Ramanuja's Vishishtadvaita, that from itself or from himself or herself, whatever gender, that entity is genderless. This universe is manufactured, manifested. That means we can view the entire existence as a cosmic body. And that cosmic body has a cosmic mind. And that cosmic mind is our personal God. We can now conceive of something because that is a creator. That is the Brahma. That Brahma, that creative aspect that is born from the unmanifest, from the all-seeing, the omnipresent, the omnipotent, the omniscient, born from that. And then from there creating all the waves of the subtle universe and ultimately the concrete universe that we see. The waves that we don't see are inferred and are seen as an effect in the very microscopic world that we call quantum physics. But in the macrocosmic world, the world of general relativity, we see it as encrusted waves which take a definite form and a corresponding set of interpreting faculties called sense organs by which we are able to grasp and see and perceive these things. And the key is, can we see that presence and that movement behind it, in it, through it, and ultimately as it and beyond it, by cultivating the sweetness of this love. Now, the various texts in the Narada Bhakti Sutras is the sutra literature for this particular type of yoga. So we have some steps, and Ramanuja, curiously enough, starts with Viveka, but not the Viveka that we know from Jnana Yoga. This kind of Viveka is to do with food. Spiritual life begins with food. We have to be able to select the correct amount of food and the correct type of food that is pure. It is that purity of food which enables us to set the mind in an undisturbed way and to make sure that the body is a fit instrument to explore this avenue of love and devotion, this spiritual practice. So there are some wonderful sutras in this Narada Bhakti Sutras. The one aspect is this: tasyaha sadhanani gayantya charyaha. That is devotion, tasyasaha. Devotion means, or devotion is there taught by great teachers. And they do this by formulating not philosophy, but forming hymns, songs, music, poetry, and using that, and a devotee following that develops devotion. It's a wonderful clue as to how can we develop this love of God. You see, it is the emotions that have to be rallied around. That becomes very easy because all these desires that we have are emotionally based. Attachment is an emotional attachment. It's not an intellectual attachment. Having understood all the principles in the philosophy that we can think of, understanding them logically, it is the emotions that get led astray. We have to rally the emotions round. If you have the sense of being embodied. And so, tat tu vishayat tagat sangataya gatcha. That attainment of devotion is through the renunciation of objects of enjoyment and attraction towards them. How? By continuous practice of worship. By listening to the sports of God. Taking it that there is a sport. An aspect of devotion is to say, Lord, you are a player, and this is your play, and this is your sport, and I would love to sport with you. And a great example is found in this in the Bhagavatam, with the gopis sporting with Krishna, playing the game. And the game has its disappointments. When the Lord is not obviously visible, and we say, oh, where are you? Where are you? The so-called dark night of the soul, a kind of area where we had an experience and it's gone. In other words, the Lord is playing this game, it's sport of hide and seek, and having fun with us. We take it seriously and weep and wail and cry until we see the delightful Lord coming again. Mainly, however, through the grace of the great souls or through a little grace of God. This is commensurate also with the Upanishads. By the grace of the self, you may say, is the self seen. That is by the grace of God. Our movement is a small movement. We have to think now of Sri Ramakrishna's example of setting the sail. Anybody who's involved themselves at all in sailing knows that the boat will not go by itself, but a little bit of maneuvering of the sail, even when the boat is not even on the water, the wind wants to take it along. Today, the wind was moving at something like 65 kilometers an hour, 40 to 50 to 60 kilometers an hour. When you open the front door, you'll be hard pressed to shut it. You have to fight against the wind. And so imagine now, speeds of winds much greater than that will lift a house, will lift a rooftop off, but will also lift a house away from its moorings. So there's no point in us making a sail, keeping it indoors, and huffing and puffing and expecting it to move. It won't move. Our small effort is not sufficient. The grace of God is enormous. The grace of God is infinite. And that's what makes the sail move. But we have to open ourselves, set the sail. And the opening aspect is something like a flower. Devotion is like a flower opening. The closing part is selfishness. We have to transmute the ego into an open channel for generosity, to spread the fragrance everywhere. The flower doesn't judge. It doesn't say, I don't like this person, so I'll withhold the fragrance here and only put it here. I'll only accept certain types of bee, but the others, no. I'll only accept a bumblebee, but the other bees, no. Bumblebee is nice and heavy. I like that form. I make an invitation. Send an RSVP invitation. Please come to my central landing station and take as much of the nectar as you want. No. Indiscriminately it offers its scent and offers its nectar to all takers, and all eyes that can see it, and has the wonderful intelligence to know how to orientate its face toward the sun and how to draw the nourishment from the soil without any instruction manual. Is this not the grace of God that when we catch it, stimulates within us a sense of wonder, adoration, and thankfulness that we call Bhakti? So it's mainly really through this movement. When we move one step toward God, God moves 1,000 steps, as it were, toward us. This is the wonderful grace of God that we have. And then we find the company of holy persons. It's difficult to attain as well as to understand, and never fails to produce results. And this has been condensed by Ramakrishna into 4 beautiful, beautiful operational statements for the devotee. Lovingly repeat God's name as terms of endearment for the beloved. This we can call japa. Secondly, sing the glories of God all the time. Strong, true, wise, full, free, truth, beauty, goodness, love, harmony. We can sing these in any way we like, but the point is that there's an internal shift of rapture when we do this. Cultivate that, keep holy company, and from time to time, go into solitude that you may meet your lover in person, in the intimate space of the heart. And this is because God and his devotees are non-different, is a wonderful statement that is made in these Narada Bhakti Sutras. I mentioned that the first movement that Ramanuja has is to do with food. And Shankaracharya also has this, but has a slightly different interpretation for this. Not just food, but mental food. Both are required, physical food and mental food. We can talk for hours together on the physical food, but Ramanuja wants us to take the purest of food, and any food, according to him, that is slaughtered, that is meat, is already tainted, is already impure. And Shankaracharya says, let us fill the mind with pure food. Let us feed the mind with holy thoughts. Let noble thoughts come to us from all sides, says the Vedas. And then we go on to this gathering all the desires and concentrating them in one particular way. And so it goes on. So this is a very brief introduction, if you will, or summary to this wonderful subject of Bhakti Yoga, but to assure you that it is one of the legitimate 4 ways that are espoused in the Bhagavad Gita as a means for this knowledge, because we are suffering from ignorance, and the antidote is knowledge. And we get this jnana through the bhakti, and the jnana will get bhakti and a sense of welfare of all beings through that path also. So let us take the sweetness of this path seriously and make an integrated effort using all the faculties that we have at our disposal, and see how this sweetness of love can enrich our lives. And even for a few moments, even if it is of a type where we balance it, because if it is not balanced, as Swami Vivekananda tells us, it becomes something like howling fanaticism. Our attitude toward the object of our love starts first, and then the object is a corresponding entity. That means if we have an attitude of a child, then that being becomes our mother or father. The attitude of a servant, that entity becomes our master. The attitude of a companion and playmate, then God becomes our companion and playmate. Whatever, however we see the universe, God becomes the corresponding opposite to it. If we think that this is God's creation, God becomes a creator. If we think that this world is his playground where he sports, then God is a player. If we think the universe is lines and verses of poetry, then God for us becomes a poet. If we think that these are waves of music, then God is our supreme musician. If we think that God is a protector, then, or that this world is a protected field, then God becomes our protector. And that is why this entity is encapsulated as a creator, as a protector, and as a playmate or player, playing and dancing. So with these few words, we wish everybody peace, peace. Peace be unto all. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.